Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast.
Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Rhombus Tix / TC Ricks, and this is the third in a 5-part series called Before the Coup. Today, the name of the episode is Run, Rabbit, Run. The first episode, I made the convincing case that a coup attempt is inevitable. Whether or not that coup will succeed, I don't know, but you would be wise to prepare for it. I'm sorry, I thought you were done. Welcome to the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. I'm Rhombus Tix, and this is the third in a 5-part series called Before the Coup, specializing in if you want to run. First episode was a summary of why a coup is going to happen. The second one is if you're going to decide to hide. This series is about practical advice on what you need to do to prepare for what I consider an inevitable attempt. Now, will this attempt succeed? No guarantees. What I can tell you is that if you prepare ahead of time and decide what you want to do, in any event of what you want to do, except for nothing, in which case that no preparation is required for that whatsoever, or participating in the coup, and I am not going to be giving advice on how to do that. Any of the other 4 strategies, running, hiding, passive resistance, or active resistance, in all 4 cases, preparation is a big deal. So I'm going to start again with what I consider the most useful and universal advice, and they get more and more edge as edge cases. I do that, right? So the most useful advice is going to be that when do you run? The safest bet is now, because as I explained in the first one, you can bet your bottom dollar that there's going to be at least one coup attempt, possibly multiple. The Republican Party is not going to change voluntarily. The Democrats are not prepared to make them change at the point of a gun. And therefore, what happened on January 6th in 2020 is going to continue again and again, right? So your safest bet is literally pack up your stuff, head out the door, and go to somewhere in Europe, right? And we'll get to that in just a second. But, you want to be 100% safe, leave now, right? If you're not leaving right now, then you need to hedge your bets, right? So what kind of strategy do you have for when you go? The most obvious thing on the board is what I mentioned in the first episode, which is that very likely the Supreme Court is going to decide that the independent legislature abomination theory, which will allow them to steal the presidency in 2025 of January, will be your best indicator, right? That one is a unique case in history where they signal early that they're going to do the coup, and you know exactly when the coup is going to happen, right? Now, the false president that they install in the new regime may not have tanks on the streets on day one, but you will start to see an inevitable slide. And frankly, if any Republican ever wins, ever again, you are going to see that. Doesn't matter if it's a Cheney Republican and like Liz Cheney, or a moderate Republican who's going to be pressured by the right, or far more likely a MAGA Republican, which is now 95% of the party and basically the only way you're going to win. So basically, if any Republican ever becomes president again, you can kiss your liberty goodbye. So that's a really good indicator of when. But say, you want to give them a chance. Say you want to play with fire, right? So if you don't leave basically the day a Republican gets control of the United States military, the most powerful weapon in the history of mankind, collectively. Secondary indicators, the main one is going to be the media. Previous to Moore v. Harper, my personal indicator was 2 opposition newspapers, right? Not one, not two, but 2. And what I mean by that is if you look at the history of neo-fascism in Hungary, in Turkey, in many of these places, the Philippines, the first thing they go after is the opposition media, which I'm not talking about just liberal media. I'm talking about normal media that doesn't agree with the Fox News, Rupert Murdoch alternate reality. One will be a canary in the coal mine. Two should be a really strong indicator that things could accelerate from there. The thing you have to understand studying World War II is that it wasn't automatic that they start, there was a period of time between Kristallnacht and when they started rounding people up in camps. And I want to remind folks that the people they put in camps wasn't just those of the Hebrew faith. It was also anybody who was gay or lesbian or gypsies or basically anybody they didn't like from a purity standpoint got put in concentration camps. And if you look at the rhetoric of the MAGA Republicans, you're going to see a situation where you know who they're going to go after first, right? They're going to go after LGBT, T in particular, trans folks in particular. They're going to go after black folks. They're going to go after Asians and Hispanics and Latinos and liberal activists and anybody that they think ever marched in an Antifa or march or ever attended an Antifa club or even went to an Antifa website. Anybody that is even remotely associated with Antifa, even if you liked an Antifa tweet, right? They will take your social media history, and just like the Stasi of East Germany, they will use it against you, and you will, at minimum, have to talk to somebody from the government about your loyalty to America at one point or another. I'm not making this up, folks. They're already saying that they're going to do this. These folks are against you in every way, shape, or form. But, okay, so, that's when, right? At the end of the day, the longer you wait, the less likely you are to be allowed to leave. At the end of the day, it takes time and preparation and money, and it's a risk because you might leave and nothing that you consider dangerous might happen for a year or 2 years or even 3 years. You don't know. What you do know is that the longer you stay, the more likely it is that at the last minute, just when you weren't expecting it, suddenly they are checking the airports and they are checking the train stations and they are checking the border. Make no mistake, folks, just because it will happen slowly doesn't mean that it won't happen. And if a Republican ever wins office again, your freedom of movement, if you are not a loyal MAGA Republican, is very likely to be restricted. Let's also consider the fact that they can and will turn on their own, right? You're a Mormon, you're Catholic. If you think that they're not going to come after you sooner or later, you don't understand what you're dealing with. It's just that simple. Anyway, all right, so let's talk about some of the practical realities of running that you might not have thought of. The first one is money, right? It takes money to move. Let's say you have literally nothing. You're a college student with, your entire life fits in a backpack. Well, good for you. On the other hand, it makes moving simple. On the other hand, if you don't have an apartment now, you probably understand how difficult it is to get an apartment, right? You might not even have a credit rating, right? All of these things are required. And guess what? They're required in another country just as much. It is true that sometimes the difference between the dollar and other countries makes it easier, like going to South America. On the other hand, if the Republicans are in charge, they're going to be tanking the economy, and the dollar will shrink relative to other economies, so your purchasing power may not be as powerful. What does this mean? It means that if you have the chance, first of all, it's always wise policy to set aside some money in case of an emergency no matter what, right? And it's always a good idea. Heck, FEMA and other people recommend you have a go bag, right? Just a quick backpack that if you need to get out of the house, if there's a tornado or a hurricane or whatever, by all means have your go bag, have your 24-hour emergency kit, and maybe even if a medium level of preparation. So you have a day's worth of time to prepare, knowing what you can fit in the car, what you can pack, and maybe doing a dry run. Those are good things, but I'm talking about long term, right? where you know that you're going to go and not come back until the United States of America is safe again, which is going to be a while because the Democrats might be fighting for our freedom, but they're not really fighting to win the game. The Republicans are doing winner take all. If a Republican ever wins the presidency again, they are going to suspend the Constitution or radically reinterpret it to the point that anything a Democrat considers what is written in the Constitution and the way they interpret it will be meaningless, and they will never be allowed power again. Make no mistake, they will and can lock you out of power. And they can do it with the current Constitution, right? Let's all remember that the Alien and Sedition Acts were passed in the early days of the Republic. And it's true that when there was an election afterwards, the Democrats won handily against the Federalist Party. But that's implying that there were free and fair elections. And if the Republicans are willing to all rally around Trump and say that he won the election and that the election of 2020 was fake, and to get any power in the Republican Party, you have to be willing to say that it was fake and join with the conspiracy theorists and the appeasers and the fifth column Americans that want to undo our republic and undo our democratic elections, then why would they stop doing that, right? Why would they ever allow anybody who isn't a Republican, and maybe not even Republicans, to vote again? Why would they do that, right? So once they steal an election, they're just going to keep stealing an election. And you look at Hungary, you look at Turkey, you look at Venezuela, and these countries all put their thumb on the scales of the election. Iran has done the same thing. They had legitimate elections for a while until they realized that reform might happen. And they started rigging every single election after that, right? They decide who's going to get to run, and they decide who's going to count the votes. The Republicans are obsessed with getting election denier conspiracy theories in the Secretary of State. So, money. It's going to take a lot of it. And I would recommend saving now as much as you possibly can. The thing you have to ask yourself is, and plan this ahead of time, because right now the most probable case for a coup attempt is going to be January 2025. So you should figure out wherever you're going to go. You're going to need at least probably 3 to 4 months of ability to live on your savings. That can include credit cards. Not recommended if you can save more than that. You're going to have the need to eat and have a roof over your head. You're going to need to be able to look for a job. So it really depends on basically looking long enough to get a job. That is a lot of money. All right. So finding a job in another country is not as easy as you think it is, because the problem is that as an American, you will find that it is, with your blue passport, many countries envy the freedom and ease with which that blue passport can get you into other countries. What they don't tell you is that little stamp you get when you go into a country is almost always a tourist visa, because everybody in the world wants American tourists. Oh, well, almost everybody in the world. But a tourist visa is not going to get you a job, right? I want you to think about what would happen if somebody from Europe, even a friendly country, came over here on a tourist visa and tried to get a job in America, right? If you've ever gotten a job, you know the hoops you have to leap through to provide identification, right? You have to have your green card or your social security card. You have to have your driver's license. You have to have ID to prove that you're going to work there, right? And the reason for that is employment, taking part in the economy and making sure you're going to pay taxes is one of the ways governments control immigration. So getting to another country is easy. Setting up residency there is very difficult, even if you're an American. Right now, if you were to just go to Canada across the border, they're not going to stop you. They're probably not going to stop you. They're not going to give you a big deal. They might ask you a few questions. There's a possibility they'll pull you aside. But generally speaking, if you go to Mexico or Canada, you just go right through the border, you show your passport, you're done. Heck, sometimes you don't even need a passport. I don't know what the current status is, but there have been instances where you could cross the border in the past with just a driver's license. That is not going to get you a house. That is not going to get you a job. Now, if you can work remotely from the United States of America, right? Let's say you work remotely and you don't mind working from 1 a.m. to, 8 p.m. or whatever crazy time things, and you work remotely, then that might work for you, right? If you never have to register with the local government, But, I want you to think about that strategy, right? If you are fleeing the United States of America, but you're still working for an American company and filing American taxes, well, guess what? If they decide to come after you, they can freeze your money and your bank account at the drop of a hat, right? They can tell your company to fire you, and your company almost assuredly will. Just because you are able to work remotely doesn't mean that your job is safe, especially if the government says, we want you to call this person into the office. It's National Go Into the Office Day. And so the government passes something that gives a tax break to companies that says, if you don't go into the office for at least today, you're going to not get the tax break. And so that would be a really easy way for them to round you up without even having to look for you. And the regime will be doing these kinds of things. So having the ability to get a job with the local government and the local environment might be a good idea. But the thing is, getting a visa in these countries is a lot harder than you think it is, especially if you're older, especially if you're a minority. Yes, I'm sorry, Europe is better in many ways than the United States about racism. But if you're going to be fleeing, unless it's for LGBT reasons, in which case some of their existing laws are good on the books, if you're a minority, you're going to have a far better time going to a country that is naturally friendly to you. And I hate to say it that way, but Europe is racist, just like the United States is racist. And while they are racist in different ways, their immigration policy, just Google it sometime, right? Google German, Swiss, Norway, Sweden, they have conservatives over there. And while their conservatives aren't quite as crazy usually as ours are, they're just the same, right? Blame the immigrant, blame the people that don't look like you. And here's the other thing you have to understand, right? They all remember, every country in the world this actually applies for. So I want you to remember this as you're flying to another country as well. Every country in the world remembers what we did with Trump. They remember Bush. Right? They like Obama. They kind of like Biden. So the fact that Americans are good half the time gets us some points. But if a crazy person is in the White House quietly, a lot of people are going to blame Americans for letting it happen. And frankly, they'd be justified in doing it. Right? My point is this, right? Even if there's a regime and they do actually literally start putting people in camps, only some countries are going to have policies in place to accept American refugees fleeing these people, right? If you're famous, they'll definitely grant you asylum, right? If you're a former congressman, former Speaker of the House, former celebrity, you're going to get in, right? You don't even have to worry about it. If you're worried about being put in a camp by Donald Trump or DeSantis or whoever randomly is in charge of the coup, and you fly to England or you fly to France and you ask for asylum, fine, you're in like Flint. If you actually can have some tie to a famous person, like, I was the press secretary for the senator of Minnesota, 10 years ago, then you might even still be able to rely on that for asylum. They're going to give asylum to people that are at the tip of the spear, like trans folks will probably, once they actually start actively oppressing people even more than they are now, you'll probably be able to get asylum. But if you're somebody that they're going to be giving a hard time to, that, you're basically preventively fleeing, they haven't gotten around to putting people like you in camps yet, that won't be as easy. And there are certain types of jobs that are very easy to get in, right? If you're a developer, if you have a lot of money and you can be an entrepreneur and you have a minimum, most countries, especially European countries, have visa types that say if you bring, $100,000 and can start a business, then, you're fine to be here as long as that business is working, right? They definitely want people to come in and start businesses. If you're rich, you're fine. But the truth is that most of us are not rich. Most of us don't even have $100,000 sitting around. And even if we did, not all of us would necessarily be able to start businesses. Now, I have learned how to do that and have at one point had a very small business, but that isn't going to help most of the folks that are listening to this for practical advice, right? So what I'm saying is, if you have the time, pick where you want to go learn their immigration policies, and do what you can to get a degree or to have a side job in a field that they're looking for. Almost every country has an immigration policy that basically favors certain kinds of workers because they want those people to come in, right? I'm going to flat out tell you folks that if you are 50 or older, unless you're rich or you automatically are going to be in one of those categories where they're automatically going to let you in, they're going to be really harsh about letting you in because they don't want people taking part in their Social Security and their generous benefits packages when you haven't paid into them, right? They want you to use American Social Security, never mind the fact that your American Social Security might be cut off by the federal government. Speaking of which, here's a little reality that most Americans are not aware of. They will tax you federal income tax no matter where you live. Right? If you're thinking about fleeing to another country, you should write your congressman to ask for the repeal of IRS regulations that say that basically if you earn more than about $150,000 a year, you could potentially end up having to pay tax in the country you're in and the country that the United States. Now, for most of us, that won't matter, but if you're a dual income household coming from someplace like New York and you're fleeing to Europe, you're going to be paying double your tax. The United States of America is one of only like 3 or 4 countries in the world that will tax you no matter where you live. And here's the thing you really have to keep in mind, right? The United States of America has treaties and regulations where the IRS can basically freeze your bank account in any country in the world, almost any country in the world. Because it's all about catching terrorists and catching tax cheats. But the fact is that an oppressive government can easily turn that around on you, right? So what I'm saying is, if you think that there's even a chance that you're going to have to flee to another country, start researching and getting involved with the expatriate societies and listen to their causes and help them out because they are loyal Americans, but we put our expatriate community through more hoops and more bullshit that there are people who renounce their citizenship just because of the bureaucratic nightmare that we impose on them tax-wise. So understand that if you flee the country, even if everybody understands that America has become the next Hungary or the next Philippines, or the next Turkey, right? Nobody's going to be in a hurry to tear up the treaty that lets the IRS tax you or freeze your accounts. And by the way, I want you to think about this because most people aren't aware of this. If you renounce your U.S. citizenship, that's not an automatic that you're going to have to get out of paying taxes to the United States government. Currently, if you renounce your citizenship, you owe 10 years in back taxes. That is right. You heard that. Even if you're Joe Schmo, earn $50,000 a year, and you're trying to move to Europe, if you renounce your United States citizenship, they expect you to pay back an average of your next 10 years of wages, which means you would owe if you earned $50,000 a year, the IRS would expect you to have to pay Uncle Sam $500,000 to renounce your United States citizenship. Now, they might not be able to collect it, except, it's the IRS. So again, they have treaties with every country in the world, including Switzerland. Those anonymous Swiss bank accounts that you used to read about, yeah, they're not so anonymous anymore because the IRS has justifiably been working to fight drug money and working to fight terrorism. And between both of those things, they have basically adopted a global hegemony over the financial market, which, sounds great when you're fighting terrorists or when you're trying to stop Russia, or when you're trying to stop China or North Korea, but all of those tools can easily be turned against the expatriate that's trying to flee. So you got problems in River City, my friend. Now, let's talk a little bit more about specific complications for specific places, right? Some places will let you be there almost indefinitely on a tourist visa. You can go to probably certain places in Africa, certain places in South America, and certain places in Central America, and certain places in Southeast Asia where they're not going to give a crap, right? You can pay, you will be able to go on a tourist visa and nobody's going to care. But some of those countries in every one of those regions do. And you would do well to know which countries are more friendly to that kind of thing than the ones that aren't. Europe is not very open, with certain exceptions. There are occasional programs where, Scotland, you've probably seen internet memes of things like, the village in Scotland that wants people to come in and populate it, or to buy this castle for $10 and, refurbish it and stuff like that. There are random things that you can do, random opportunities that will pop up, but you need to research these things. I certainly would not depend on luck if I'm trying to move my family to another country. Europe is going to be the safest place for democracy in the foreseeable future. But, not every country in Europe is the same. And bottom line, knowing people there who can advocate for you is not a bad thing. So if you already have friends in Europe, I would potentially consider getting to know them better. Yeah. The last thing I recommend as a bit of practical advice is, if you can get the frequent flyer, I'm sorry, not the frequent flyer, the Homeland Security Quick Pass and the Customs Quick Pass, I would recommend getting those. And the reason I say that is because if you're trying to flee and you're not taking the incredibly risky attempt to get out on a boat, right? I mean, if you're going to hire on a freighter and just basically have a backpack, and you're lucky enough to do that, then by all means, sir. If you own a boat or think you can steal one, people have fled the country on boat before, and initially, especially on day one, when Ron DeSantis rolls into the presidency, they're not going to seal the borders. That'll take a while, right? Ron DeSantis' first act of being president is probably not, seal the airports, have the Navy interdict the coast, the coast. They're just not going to do that, right? But, so you probably will be able to get out on the airport just fine. But if you're one of those people that waits, right, it's like, well, maybe Ron DeSantis isn't that bad, and then they start putting some people in camps, and they start putting more people in camps, and then you do the inevitable math that, they're going to put you in a camp and you're trying to go out, then at that point, you might have more problems, right? And my point is that if you get this TSA, I forget suddenly the name of it, the TSA Secure Pass, or the Quick Pass, or any number of ways they call it, as well as the Customs Pass, right? Those are less people you have to interact with, right? And the less government officials you have to interact with, the less chance you're going to run into some person that is a secret member of the Proud Boys or the Oath Keepers and has your name on a secret list somewhere, and they see your name and they're going to stop you and pull you aside into a little room, right? Now, of course, there's always that chance that it's going to happen anyway. But my point is that the advantage of those programs, if you can afford them, is A, you get out quicker, and B, you have to interact with less people. And the less people you have to interact with in a situation like that might literally save your life.
This has been the Tossing Grenades at Windmills podcast. Buy my book, Have Name Will Travel, at Amazon and other markets. RedAnvilCreative.com contains all our podcasts. Copyright
2022.
To fight the forces of evil!